G'day guys, we're live. Okay, just having a couple of technical difficulties. Yeah, got there eventually. Anyway, I better cycle through a few things. I did get your email, Jared. Yeah, that's fine. You know, I know you crook. Just if you want to come on. That's fine. How long you want to, that's fine as well, mate. You know. Just cycle through a couple of these. G'day, Gusto. Luke. Just put a couple of these up. Try to. Didn't get much sleep last night. God, I sort of went late to sleep about 2:30. You know, circadian rhythms. Bad boy. Yeah, so sort of didn't get up early, didn't see Pim's thing. I'd actually noticed it last night and quickly downloaded the actual study that she got, looked at it. I emailed her 3 older studies that were related to the same issue that I was actually looking at, investigating as well. I still haven't seen, you know, because I got onto Bart's, you know, late as well. So didn't even see most of Bart's. And so I'll have to check Pim's later and see what she's got to say in regards to, basically, you know, in terms of iron metabolism and, you know, and the issues around that. So, you know, I can only tell you what the old studies were focused on and some of the other stuff that, you know, that I'm sort of, so until I actually see the sort of latest study, I'm in the dark as much as whoever hasn't in that regard. Brazilian time, yeah. You guys in your damn time zones. Well, you're well informed now, so you've got no excuse whatsoever in that regard. Very Easter-like here. 29 chicken eggs. Somebody's having a party with eggs. Yeah, the Greek Orthodox thing also, we have the sort of the red eggs where we compete, we bust each other's eggs. That's next. This year it's not coincident with the actual the Easter of the Protestants and the Roman Catholics, because we're Catholics as well, but Orthodox Catholics, and so in that regard. But you know, I mean, it's next week for us, so I'll be doing something with Dad. It'll be sort of low key, so I may have to shift as well. So the time slot for next week is going to be problematic. Let's put it that way. So we'll get to that later on. And Jared will be potentially popping in for a short amount of time. He's a bit crook, a bit under the sun. So, g'day, mate. He's a bit under the sun, Zach. You know, he's sort of not feeling that well. I think basically maybe it could be milk flu. Could be, you know, severely suffering from, you know, having to eat other things other than consuming milk. And, you know, so he's not feeling happy, potentially. It's a rumor. It's a rumor. You were forced here. Good to see you, Sophia. Yes, some scurrilous person. Yes. We're a pretty friendly little crowd here, so, in that regard. Oops. I'll just go through until I hit a question. Definitely weird this year with, this is Harut, with no Easter gathering with the family. Yeah, look, it's a bit like that for everyone. I'm doing something with Dad, and I'll be communicating with him and just making sure. And I've said to him, look, avoid a couple of days, do your shopping early in the week, avoid a couple of days, and I'm going to do the same thing. And so, at least then I know that I'm fine. I'm not going to actually put him at risk. He's 85 years old after all. So, so it's a bit like that. It's, yes, very unconventional. Yeah, definitely, Luke. Yeah, Jared's suffering milk withdrawals. You can imagine, it must be horrific for him. Actually, it was horrific for me this week. My milk supply ended up down at the tarmac at Hobart Airport, and apparently somebody forgot to deliver it. So it went off. Freaking hell. So I missed out this week, and I'm down to my sort of last litre, and I've actually got some here right now, but yeah, my raw milk supply is draining away. I'll have to try and get a bit more this week just to be on the safe side, because it's, I thought they were going to be quite reliable, but unfortunately with all the things that are happening at the moment, with all the lockdown and stuff like that. My ancestry is Greek, but I was born in Australia, in Tasmania actually, which is an island to the south of the main continent of Australia. So, well, Australia is an island continent, but Tasmania is basically on the east coast to the south of Melbourne, if you know where that is, or Victoria, sort of to give you an idea. It's a nice area, actually. That's it. Yes, precisely. Tassie, as we call it down here. Mm-hmm. It comes from New South Wales. So it's a company that actually produces, actually, I think it's northern New South Wales, but I'm not, don't quote me. And they produce a new, they use a new method. I know there's raw milk manufacturers in other parts of the world, which either it's at the farm gate. So there's three methods. One at the farm gate. The second method is basically where they put it through the piping, like you would do with pasteurization, but it's chilled, and you do lose a few nutrients. It's not as good. It's been criticised by a number of people, but it's it still retains a lot of the enzymes and a lot of things, so you can actually still utilise the lactase enzymes and stuff like that. This method is it's a very different method. Developed in Australia. What they do is they will bring the milk in from the different farms in the region. Then they will basically put it into a holding tank, and that tank will basically then bottle it. So it'll all get bottled into the bottles, and then those bottles will be put into this device that's developed in Australia. And what it does is it creates 6 times the atmospheric pressure of the lowest point in the Pacific Ocean. And by doing that, it's a specific pressure gradient that doesn't affect the rest of the milk, doesn't affect the enzymes or anything. Everything remains as it is. It just breaks the membranes of the bacteria. So you lose the bacteria, both obviously, both any pathogenic, but also beneficial stuff as well. So that's the only element that's actually lost from the raw milk, is both beneficial or potentially any pathogenic bacteria. So, yep, I mean, you could say basically, well, you're losing out on some of the, those bacteria strains. You could basically, that they do have a kefir form, so you could use their kefir form if you wanted that. But I don't see it as a very, a big loss. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a good, healthy microbiome, not an issue. If you don't and you want to do a bit of kefir, just do a bit of kefir in that regard. Okay. Yeah, I know. Oh, you've been with it, so I'm sure it's been without eggs for 2 weeks. Well, that's a damn God. That would drive me up the wall. Eggs are very important for me, especially the choline that I need for that specific pathway. Yeah, that would be annoying, but what do you do? So Zach's asking me how my dad's going. Yeah, he's fairly mobile. He still, gets out in the garden and does his stuff. Usually if I use any herbs, which I usually use occasionally, that's, he grows his own herbs, so I usually go and get fresh ones. But I probably don't use them as much nowadays. I did use them in the early days of when I was doing my carnivore diet, and especially when I was doing keto, and low carb. But sort of now I'm, and he usually, he complained initially, but sort of he's eased off now. Doesn't give me a hard time. And occasionally he brings stuff around. He leaves it, then I have to pass it on to other people. What do you do? Yeah, but he's pretty good. He's in good nick. He's 85. And he's in really, he sort of does his weightlifting twice a day. So in the morning while he's fasted, and in the afternoon. So, keeps pretty fit. But because he's doing it consistently, and sort of he doesn't want to build, because he sort of restored his muscles that he had in his 60s. But he didn't want to, go over the top or anything like that. So I said to Dad, well, all you need to do is just do it on a regular basis. And he does it every day nearly, for just to, preserve your muscles. I said, you don't need to go up the weights, because you're not a bodybuilder. You're not trying to build muscle. So I said, well, just do what you need to do for maintenance. At your age, that's the key thing that you want to do. You don't want to be too anabolic, for reasons of longevity, the way I see it. But you don't want to be either too catabolic either. So I do encourage. He does a 24 on Mondays. He does a 24-hour sort of. It's more than 40. It's about, probably gets up to 30 odd hours of fasting. So he does, and the other days he just eats regular, probably about 10:30 onwards until the early evening. So he tends to do a bit of a close to something like probably 15 hours without eating most of the time, sometimes 16. So he keeps within that area, does his weights and all that, and he's in really good nick. So you're welcome. I'm not sure what the brand is, what that was about. No, it's the actual brand is, what is it? This one here. made by cow, it's called. I'll quickly bring it up so you can actually see which one it is, rather than basically just a quick share. So here it is, this brand here. So it's called Made by Cow, and it's cold pressed raw milk. So Jersey herd. And the milk is unmeshed. So it's not basically, there's no sort of industrial processes to it or anything like that. They just put in the bottles, and basically, and that's the other difference with the other method that's used in North America, where they use the chilling method and stuff like that. This one's just put in the bottles, and they eliminate the bacteria with that process. So it's basically sourcing it, bottling it, putting it under pressure, and then basically, batch test and delivered. So it's a very simple process, and that's a sort of the pasteurization process which they go through, which is far more, involved. And so you lose a lot of nutrients. You lose most of the vitamin C. So depends on the heat level. When it comes to pasteurization, you can retain a small amount of vitamin C, but most of it tends to be destroyed in pasteurization. And the long life stuff that has none, absolutely none. And different countries have different levels of pasteurization. So the vitamin C content, the B vitamins, and some of the minerals, depending on how it's done, the processing, the time, and all that can vary. So there's it's a mixed bag in that regard. Okay. So what is Luke asking? I will probably cut dairy for a while when I go carnivore, trying to heal Hashimoto's. Yep. Fair enough. Look, the thing is, if you've got things, underlying conditions, maybe things like, leaky gut, things like that, dairy is not a good idea. Eggs may not be a good idea. Crustaceans may not be a good idea. It may mean just going back to bone broths, organ meats, and muscle meats, and doing that for a while, heal your body, because those sort of things are not going to be reactive. Also, when you eat those sort of things, you're going to push up your acidity levels, which means you're going to break the amino acids and fatty acids into their basic constituents, to be utilized by the body. And that's a very important thing. And then as things start to heal and sort of improve, then you can basically start incorporating other animal foods. Even Frank, he basically couldn't handle dairy for a very long time. And as he healed and improved, he basically incorporated, now doesn't have any issue. He thought he basically had sort of a lactose intolerance or something like that. And I said to him, at the time when we were still talking, that he basically should, investigate, some genetics, but he never got around doing that. But, eventually, he did give the raw milk a try. And, so two possible scenarios there. One, he may not only have one of the SNPs for the lactose persistency, so he needed the extra enzymes from the raw milk. So that may have been an issue in that regard. But also, underlying health issues, leaky gut or whatever, that were being resolved. Because I know he was chatting with the guy, the gut guy, because I had interactions with that guy, and sort of sent him some information as well ages ago, and he actually offered me free consultations, but I didn't actually need it, so I didn't take him up on that. But he was, Frank, I know, was interacting with this guy for a while, so he probably helped him out because he's pretty cluey. He's an omnivore. He's not a carnivore, this guy, but he does. He understands that animal foods are very important. Acidity, that everything starts in the stomach, fix the stomach, and everything flows here. So he agrees with me on that very much. So we're in sort of unison in that regard, and I think that's always been my start point. Fix your gut. Fix your stomach, and everything else will resolve itself, So if you get the acidity down, you start breaking down these molecules of food, everything starts falling into place, because you're going to basically, when you've got a certain level of low pH, you will clear out SIBO as well out of your, small intestine. So, but if you don't have sufficient acidity, you're going to have basically, reflux. You're going to have all these damn issues, and they'll just basically be causing all sorts of malabsorption issues and other issues throughout that. Yeah, it's well, this company actually creates that, so you can go to that site, and I don't know where you're located. Are you located in Australia, or are you located somewhere else on the planet? Just let me know so I can. That would help. Yeah, I mean, that's fine if you feel like that about this company. There are other companies that actually produce at the gate in different countries, and this is the only type we can get in Australia, and it's the least interfered with milk. So, in that sense, there's no other alternative for us other than literally illegally obtaining it. And I'm not going to say that I've done something like that, because just in case the authorities are watching this line, I neither confirm or deny. But the thing is, it's really hard to get in Australia. Like in Canada, it's impossible. It's completely illegal. In Australia, it's very limited to these sort of processes and stuff like that. So this is better than nothing. And there is actually, if you go onto the site, they do show the university study that actually looked at, the nutrients, so you don't lose anything. It's the closest thing you'll get to raw milk, to actually unmechanically treated in any way milk, in Australia at least. So in other countries, yes, you can get access to the farm gate, and that's not a problem. But in Australia, it's going to be a long time before we can actually access directly from the farmer, without basically being picked up by the police. So, so it's not going to happen in any time soon. It's just the reality. So that's my only option. If I had a better option, I could get it from the farm gate, I'd get it from the farm gate. But since I can't, that's my second best option. Calf, yeah, look, they've got their place. So I think organ meats, when you eat organ meats, they help those organs as well, because they're rich in the nutrients that those organs can utilize, which is important. I mean, your heart, just think of it. What's your heart got? And your body and your heart needs coenzyme Q10. It's got massive amounts, because it needs so much energy to basically pump and keep on pumping. Things like your liver, very high in retinol, very high in things. So if you need, very high in MK4, so menaquinone 4, which is a vitamin K2 of the animal form. and that's also involved in, a number of processes within the liver itself, plus biosynthesis. So very important nutrient that the liver requires. So there are, that's why, goose liver pate and, liver is a good source of MK4. So in that regard, I would, if you've got issues with a specific organ, I would also eat that organ. That would be a good strategy. Good idea if you are. Okay. We'll just cycle through a couple here and see whether we hit another question. G'day, mate. We'll have a bit of the comedy side. Hey, Grandpa. That's Jared for anyone that doesn't. Sophia probably doesn't know what we mean. It's an inside joke on this channel. Just quickly, what is your view on biodynamic farming as compared to organic farming? Organic farming criteria can brought and paid and can't. Well, look, there's advantages of both in some regards. So basically, for organic farming is basically pesticide, all those chemical free type things, and biodynamics. Primarily, a lot of them basically also use a similar method, but they also look at a lot of the dynamics of how to utilize things, and a sort of a modern version of like our old crop rotation, of utilizing things from different animals and trying to basically minimize the inputs from outside. Both methods, tend to be much better for both the environment and better for the soils as well. So it depends how people are practicing it. They're just words in a sense. Like for instance, Sophia said earlier about this farm and all that, their practices. I mean, they could be better, and she's right. And there's a lot of other, organic farmers and biodynamic farmers that could be better as well. So they vary. It's a gradient. It's not, not everybody's the same. And so you really have to, when you're sourcing things or looking at where things are coming from, you sometimes have to investigate if you want to know whether that product is the best, And as I said earlier, if I could actually get from the gate, milk from the gate, I wouldn't be using this, So there are sometimes limitations where we've got no other option, where we're forced to basically, go down a certain path. I'll be sad without my dairy through. Almost can't believe it when people say they've healed it. Look, after all, the doctors told me healing Hashi with diet sounds magical. They do think that, but that's because they've been brought up in the paradigm of using, pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. I mean, I've got cousins on my mother's side. One of them is a pharmacist, and she's worked as a consultant for multinational corporations in this field. She knows the ins and outs of the industry. The other one's, a senior specialist doctor that basically, but you are even a good friend of mine who's also my doctor, who's also a person that I used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em with them, poker. So they're nice people, but they are they've been educated in that sort of paradigm where if you go back, as I've sort of said, before the 60s, like 60, but even in the 60s, all the earlier doctors, they were educated. They had a more generalized education, which covered nutrition and many other things. I mean, Dr. Atkins had studied some nutrition. People like that had some knowledge. I mean, they used to recommend back in the 60s and 50s low carbohydrate diets. They were quite, standard practice. You were overweight, they'd put you on a low carb diet. So that was standard. It was basically, this whole system was upended by Ansel Keys, and his nutritional mafia group that basically upended the whole system and then basically said, we're the experts. Doctors should not be advising. It should be nutritional experts. And these were people that were basically industry funded, people that were and they took over that whole field, And as they took over that whole field, they pushed politicians to make, recommendations, and recommendations that then were followed by many other countries. Because what America does, if America sneezes, most other countries start catching a cold. And that's exactly how, everything sort of took place. And I mean, most doctors now, they do very little, if any, nutritional studies. So they're completely oblivious about the importance of diet. They're completely oblivious. So, I mean, you only have to take a look at some of them, how overweight and sick they are themselves, popping one pill after another. So, I mean, even my cousins, they get a lot of information from me. So because I do my own research on, I look at stuff and I've discovered things, and I've sort of helped both family members and people further afield, like you guys. So, I mean, I'm not critical of the, like the doctors, Your average doctor basically has very little information or knowledge of nutrition. I'm critical about the actual establishment, like the medical establishment, those institutions, those structures, those political bodies that basically run, because they're full of lawyers and accountants and all these bean counters and people that have got, that are driving agendas, Those are the people that I've, got an axe to grind with, because they're the ones that basically are causing, they are actually the ones that are going to government and, whispering in their ear, you should be doing this, this, and this, which is deleterious. Or some of the academics that are basically on the, Sugar Council and stuff like that of Australia. I've gone after a couple of them, and all they do is they, on their blogs or whatever, they just delete all my comments. So, you do it a couple of times, then you get sick and tired of going back there and putting more comments. But, and these people are on, $250,000 or even more, big paychecks from these big corporations and these big political entities that represent these corporates, interests. So, yeah, it's, doctors are really have no idea, what's happening. Some of them are cluey, like Fecky, in Tasmania, that sort of realised, this isn't working. Was a bit willing to basically look beyond his own profession, did a bit of investigation and realised, and fix his own health, and then started fixing some of the health of his own clients. And then basically the establishment went after him, tried to basically take away his license to practice as a doctor in Tasmania. I mean, we've had the incident in South Africa with Tim Noakes. It's hard for people to step out of line, in that regard. It's really hard, or even to look at those sort of things. When you're told by the establishment, this is the way you will practice medicine. This is the this is the acceptable way. And then you'll have the drug rep turning up, you know, giving you all these flyers. You're up to your eyeballs, you know, working all day from the morning until the evening, trying to cover all these patients, and then trying to, you know, review their cases. So, you know, so you can sort of adjust their medication and all that sort of stuff. You hardly have time, you know, beyond spending time with your family and then going to sleep. Very little time to basically really look into any depth outside of those immediate sort of things that are basically preoccupying you. So you got to understand that. I mean, I'm sort of lucky because I've got people in my family and friends that are basically in the medical establishment themselves. I mean, even a very good friend of mine, she's on my Facebook page, and she basically works as a consultant in the hospital. You know, so plus other people that that are nursing staff that I know there as well in the Royal Hobart Hospital in Hobart. So, you know, I talk to these people. I know exactly, you know, what their sort of needs are, their difficulties, what they're going through, the pressures, the time frames, you know, that they can do things. It's not easy. Believe me, it's not bloody easy, you know. You know, I don't have an axe to grind with those people. I've got an axe to grind with the people, the establishment that's running the show and doing the politics behind the scenes. Yep. Yeah, look, a lot of people, you know, I mean, I know Bart doesn't do a lot. He's more a sort of a cheese person aside, which is under. So Luke's saying just has she aside, which is under control via meds. I'm quite healthy compared to most. Look, you know, you really have to look at, you know, I'm glad you're going to make some changes to your diet. And I think that as you transition into a carnivore diet, you will see better results. And I think you should test yourself. And then, you know, as the need for medicines goes down, you know, the best thing is to get off the meds as fast as you can. They do cause a lot of dysregulation, so to your thyroid function. So I would look at, you know, transitioning. The quicker the better, mate. So Zach's saying I can't stay lean out for some reason. Would I include dairy? Look, it depends. People get affected by different parts of dairy and all that. Even if I monitor calories, I still has some influence on me. Cheese is fine, however. I have a fair bit. Look, because of the casein can be addictive, and people can, without realizing, overconsume. See, with milk, the casein is more diluted. And if you're actually having proper raw milk, it tends to have far less sugar anyway, which is another important aspect to it, rather than regular milk. Yeah, so there could be it could be factors. If you're not using raw milk, you may only have one of the alleles of lactose persistency. Then at the same time, you could be consuming more than your caloric requirements for the amount of activity you're involved. So that can be a factor as well. As I said, I usually promote eggs and dairy when people are doing very anabolic things, you know, really pumping iron and stuff like that. A bit like, you know, I mean, normally I just have a glass of milk a day. That's it. You know, I keep, and very little cheese, like probably 100 grams or 50 grams or stuff like that. I don't consume massive amounts, but I have it on a regular day, you know, every day. But the thing is, you know, if I was to, I remember my old bad days where I could sit down and just literally go through quite a bit of cheese and quite a bit of yogurt, cheese and milk and stuff like that. And that's, you know, even though I may have the lactose persistent genes, if you're trying to lose, if you're trying to stay lean or lose weight, it's not an advisable thing, because you remember the sort of the dairy ladies, you go to Switzerland, places like that are a bit more plump, so obviously, yep, they were consuming some grains as well, but at the same time, dairy is more anabolic than many other animal foods in that regard. And the only reason the Maasai can probably get away with 5.5 liters of milk a day is because they are very active. They go out long distances. They're quite active, herding their animals and all that. If they were sedentary, they'd probably put on weight as well, and they wouldn't be as lean. So it does play a role. If you're not hitting that threshold and you're actually burning through those energy nutrients that are coming in, then you're always going to be below that threshold for resistance, and as a consequence, you're not going to have any issues. If you're basically pushing, even if you're pushing the Randall cycle, even at the very low gradient, and your access to energy from the bloodstream is going like on off all day, as you're pulling in small amounts, as energy is being utilized by the mitochondria, still, that is going to prevent you from basically leaning out, so there's those sort of factors. So yeah, I'd say it's important. If you're trying to lean, I did the same thing when I did keto and lost 15 kilos in 6 months. It was the same thing. I ditched the dairy for a while. So yeah, if you're trying to lose weight and you're trying to become lean, I would stick to organ meats, muscle meats, fish, things like that. Yep. I get raw goat milk. Actually, that's the best. Yeah, in New South Wales. Oh, so you're in Australia, okay? And it's legal, but it's heavily regulated and expensive. Shit, $10 per litre. God Almighty. Well, your family's got plenty of this to be able to afford that sort of stuff, especially if you do your Cleo bath. I'm jealous. Yeah, I love goat milk. I actually even helped my auntie in Greece on the west coast herd goats. So, and I used to sort of get under there, and, I didn't do anything else for any of those with evil thoughts. But yes, it's, I love goat milk. It's actually the closest animal to human milk in composition, and also has far more those medium chain triglycerides that convert into ketone bodies and short chain fatty acids than compared to other milks. So it's got a beautiful profile. And if you've got a salicylate problem and you can't handle coconut, oil or stuff like that, for medium chain triglycerides, goat milk is the next best thing. But, as you said, it's expensive, very hard to get, and highly regulated, and possibly I wouldn't be able to get it in Tassie, which is... do please send me an email with the actual company you get it from and details, and I'll actually contact them, see whether they're prepared to send me anything to Tasmania or not. If they, I can only try. Even if you don't want to send me an email, just put it in the comments after, when this live stream finishes, as long as I can get just, to contact the company. Oops. Oh, it's gotcha. Okay. So it's a bit... So it's actually, I should have read the whole thing. I didn't read the bottom part. Yes. Okay. Milk smuggled in from Queensland. Okay. So it's a Queensland, and you probably know the people, and okay. So it's not going to be easily available for somebody like me. Okay. Damn. Anyway, then if you're going to provide me any details, do it privately, not publicly, and email me. So if you're going to provide me, if they do, anyway, next time I'm up that way, I may, if I know what company it is, I may drop in and grab some. Dairy puts on weight on me fairly easily. Yeah, look, it does it with a lot of people in that regard. So if your weight's stable, not an issue. I mean, I've been weight stable for 2.5 years. It's not an issue. But if you're trying to lose weight, yeah, then it can slow it down. It doesn't mean, I mean, even when I was doing keto and losing the 15 kilos, in 6 months, I still was consuming a bit of cheese here and there. So I wasn't completely not having any cheese. But when I jettisoned, and I did it occasionally, but when I jettisoned for the majority of that time, it had a positive effect. Yes, you felt like a criminal. Yeah, it's bizarre to feeling like a criminal because we're dealing with raw milk. It's the world's just a crazy place. Yeah, it's something that I do on Saturdays, unfortunately. But it is good. I do get good quality stuff. I don't, it's milk based because they do, I mean, there are ice creams out there that have got seed oils and a lot of other crap, So the milk that I do, the ice cream that I do buy is it's a localized brand, which is made from milk product, not other crap. And, it is more expensive, but, I just, get a tub, put in my fridge, and I have basically a third of a tub, and it lasts me for 3 weeks. So it's every Saturday when I have that little indiscretion. And it's not a lot because you're only getting, all up about 12 grams of carbs, which is nothing. It's in an insignificant amount. Okay, Zach, I love the fact that in recent years, I can visit cattle stations to the north and south of me and see the operations, meet the owners, and buy meat and organs from them as I choose. Awesome position. Yep, it is a different paradigm. Tasmania's very similar. You can actually access local producers in a similar way. So yeah, and StreamYard decided to jump again. God almighty. It's the only thing I just realised there's a lot of questions here. We better start moving through. Next month, a ban on hygienic raw milk in Canada is going through a charter challenge as a trial. Okay, yeah, Jared will be happy if something good comes out of that. Court battle a few decades now. Okay. Thank you, Honest. It's next week for us Greek Orthodox. But thank you. And happy Easter to anyone that's celebrating it today. Actually changed. Yeah, look, things are happening. Things are progressing everywhere. So that's the sort of the naturalmilk.org that basically. So they're the main company, I suspect, or organisation that are basically fighting for that. It's good to hear. Yeah, they are definitely fighting big interests in that regard. Yep. Look, them and their coined the term quackery of homeopathic doctors. Look, I'm not really big into homeopathic sort of stuff. I think that people in the homeopathic field, there are charlatans in that as well. There are some good, good operation, good naturopaths and stuff like that understand human physiology, diet, certain types of plants that can actually act as have a hermetic healing type effect in the body. Those sort of people get it. But there are, like in every single profession, there are the sort of, your charlatans and people that are, so you got to be careful who you pick in the different professions and stuff like that. There are plenty in the carnivore and keto community that, are basically naturopathic doctors, which are really good, and I know some of them as well in Tasmania that are really good and reliable. Some chiropractors that are fairly good as well, some that are not, some that are very unethical in the way they do things, like everyone. There are people that use different sort of like, it's a method that was developed in Australia called Bowen, which is basically sort of pressuring muscle points and on your nervous system to sort of reset things and get your body to heal itself. And I've used that as well. I think there is that brain body connection with our environment, our circadian rhythms, all these sort of things. And basically, if we have good nutrition, we sort of encourage the body to heal. It does do wonders. There is a place for basically a standard MD. If you've got a major cut and you're bleeding, you need to stop that bleeding. Otherwise, your blood pressure will drop too low and you will pass out and then eventually die. So if you've got basically something that like a major tear or whatever that needs to be surgically dealt with, yep. So a lot of these people have their place, but the problem is in all these fields, there is a lot of crackpottery and charlatanism also that exists. Stuff that has no scientific base or not even basically replicatable. So even if something hasn't been studied and it's not scientifically proven, if somebody's getting consistent results doing a technique or a method, then basically, just because that hasn't been investigated doesn't mean that it invalidates that. So we need to be very careful. It's when people do things and you're going back and forth, not getting results, you realize, well, this person doesn't really understand, or doesn't understand or get it in some way. How, what, hard to say. Yep, he was a very nasty person. He was a great promoter of vegetable oil, even though he didn't touch it. He went to the southern part of Italy and focused on getting as much olive oil and, animal products that he could inside him. And he said it doesn't affect him, even though he was having antipasto, and everybody knows what antipasto is, a whole lot of cured meats. But, this is Italy. You've got to live like the Italians, very much, he was, how can I put it? He was one of the, actually, I think I'll go with what usually Bart says. He was basically a criminal, He was basically a criminal, He's dead. He can't sue me now. He was a criminal, Simple as that. There's no other way of describing him. When you've got data for 22 countries and you then basically plot something up with only, 6 or 7 countries and deliberately mislead people, that's just. And then he was involved also in one of the big studies that they did to prove the lipid hypothesis. And they buried, because they didn't get the results they were looking for, they buried the study for 17 years. And after one of the actual study people had actually passed away, and his wife actually handed over to the university all his documents and and all the tapes that were down in the basement, and they took them back and they looked at the tapes, and they actually found that not only basically did they get the opposite result, the people that are on the the so-called cholesterol lowering sort of regime with those seed oils and stuff like that had worse outcomes, but also they'd actually found there was a few nuggets of gold in there. One where people that had very high levels of saturated fat actually had really good protection and really good health outcomes for that study. And that was another thing that was buried. You had to really go through. I can't remember how many pages down you had to go to find that. And that was on the reel that was in the basement. So, I mean, these people basically just criminals that basically were peddling things. It's like, they'll sit there eating their big steaks and they'll say, you can have the kibble, you ignorant little man, at the bottom, of the pile. And that's exactly, these people, what can you say? God, just really angers me because I ended up with a heart condition in my mid-40s because of people like Ansel Keys. And I believed that shit. And I cooked everything in seed oils. And basically, I used to criticize my father for using olive oil and other people for using other things other than, and but I was the one that was the actual fool that actually believed these people because I had no idea, like the rest of us, in nutrition. I had an interest in science, physics, other areas of inquiry, archaeology, and all sorts of other things, history, whatever else. But, I didn't really have an interest in nutrition. Yes. The consequence of that are having my chest ripped off open in my mid 40s. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Look, my doctor's on meds as well. Yeah. On statins, and I've been telling him to get off them, but yeah, they won't listen. He says, "Oh, it's working for you. Here's me. I got regression. My the bypass surgery, which I had a double bypass, those are cleaned completely. And I've got regression, and and I'm not taking statins or any medication actually. And there's my doctor basically, taking the stuff and all that, and I'm going, or taking blood pressure tablets and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. It's just crazy." Well, they did because basically they wanted to sell drugs. That's basically it. That's where the money was. You know, you know, trying to help people with nutrition, like the old doctors used to do in the past, and that's the problem. That's where the medical sort of industry, as I call it, took over medicine and literally corrupted a lot of the science, corrupted a lot of the methods and approaches. If you go back, most doctors used to do all their research themselves. Dentists used to do all their research themselves. I mean, Weston A. Price, that most people forget, was basically, not some little dentist just in Whoop Whoop land or whatever, some nobody. He was basically the head of the Dental Association of America at the time. So he was a top dog back in the 1930s, right at the top of the pile, the political pile or the actual dental association. So, and he was doing research as well in government labs, getting government money to do this research as well. So he wasn't some nobody in that regard. And he went around and actually did investigations and all that, and came up with very good, information for the rest of us to realize how much nutrition plays a role in good oral hygiene, and that oral hygiene has an effect on general health of the body. So but that was a different era when these people would look at diet, lifestyle, and all these other factors in combination with ailments, but as these vested interests started taking over medicine, and powerful organizations started emerging to take over the professions and control the professions, not merely take them over, but control the professions. That's when a lot of the science got bastardized. That's where a lot of science was basically massaged to fit their own agendas. And that's where a lot of people that didn't want to play ball were pushed aside, were marginalized and all that. I mean, you only have to remember Atkins, the sort of threats and attacks that he suffered continuously, and even after his death, they still, make a whole lot of, lies about him. I mean, he was fine. He fell over, he slipped on ice, hit his head, and basically ended up with severe, a severe injury, a head injury, ended up in hospital. And then they pumped a whole lot of stuff into him that ended up putting a whole lot of weight on. Because we know there's many people. I mean, I've got a guy that sits right next to me at work that basically takes certain meds and has put on a whole lot of weight. A lot of these, blood pressure tablets and a whole lot of other tablets basically induce, fat deposition, putting on weight. So it's not as if we don't know, and all these sort of chemicals are well known to do that, So he bloated up like a balloon, and that's basically, you don't get the fat that quick, in normal conditions. It takes a very long time. So, so basically it was the way it was handled, So, but the vegetarians and everyone else will point to that. Ignoring, just days before the images of him, the days before. So they'll just point to those. What can you say? Let alone some of this medication actually induced a heart attack. But the problem is his heart was clean, had no issues whatsoever. I mean, if this diet caused these issues, why am I having regression? If these diets cause that, why basically the new, vessels that they've put in, have no a clean. The blood perfusion is completely normal. It's because basically it works. It's always worked. If we go back before the recommendations, the food recommendations in the 1970s, most people were quite lean. Most people quite healthy. Most people, you look at pictures from the 60s and 70s, you don't see many fatty people or overweight people around. They just didn't exist. And people consumed, even in those days, organ meats and all sorts of foods of that sort. It was that was the sort of period when all these newfangled type foods were coming in. But, the only thing that actually that really pushed up the heart rates, and this is really important, it's the seed oils. And I've been saying that for ages. If you go back to all my early chats with Bart, it's all about the seed oils. Lipid peroxidation. They did mechanistic studies back in the 80s. And I talk about those, the very important thing about the seed oils. They are the key drivers. If you're basically consuming some sugar, but you're out there doing a lot of physical work like a lot of the Asians and all that, and you're in a caloric deficit most of the day, you're not going to be engaging the Randall cycle. You're not going to actually have any issues. It may not be the most optimal food, but you're not basically going to be getting very sick. But if you're sitting around like we do now, because a lot of us are office workers and stuff like that, and basically consuming highly palatable, calorically dense type foods, which come out of the factories, obviously you're going to have a lot of sickness. And that's what's changed radically, So, yes, it's really that reality. What's for Bernardo? So the whole thing, milk having bacteria and bacteria is dangerous. Look, there are pathogenic bacteria that are non-pathogenic bacteria. I mean, one of the worst pathogenic bacteria would be the bubonic plague. But there are beneficial like lactobacillus and stuff like that. I mean, there's a difference between one and the other, You know, yeah, it's just crazy. And there's more salmonella outbreaks with vegetables than I've ever seen with meat or dairy. It's just bloody nonsense in that regard. What are my thoughts on the gut microbiome being altered by a person's negative or positive state of mind? Yep, it can have effect. Yep, can definitely have an effect. There's plenty of science to show that, you know. So your state of mind can have an effect on your gut microbiome, but do we understand how much? Nope. You know, is the science really up to scratch on that issue? Nope. But I would say that if we look at people who have mental issues or stuff like that, when you're on a carnivore diet, less of an issue. You look at a whole lot of people that have switched, that have had bipolar, schizophrenia, a lot of mental, we're talking about severe mental disorders now here, not something minor, severe mental disorders, and they've gone onto a keto or carnivore diet, and they've had either partial or complete resolution. So I would say that a diet, which is an ancestral diet, will tend to actually improve your gut microbiome. And when it comes to the gut microbiome, we don't know a lot, you know. I'll give you an example. I mean, if you go to my post that I actually post my myths and falsehoods on veganism that I've got in my main discussion page on my channel, so people can go and grab that. I've said grab it, post it wherever you want, or look through that and understand and get some understanding about these things. And there is a post, I can't remember whether it's number 3 or number 4, that talks about I think it's because I've got no, it's not the fiber one. There's a fiber myth there in the other one. I think it's something about the gut microbiome. Anyway, it all stems from when Hench Herbivore, Paul basically made a big issue about how Prevotella is really high on a vegan diet, and so how great it is to have these sort of bacteria. At lower levels, Prevotella is fine. But at very high levels, as I showed, and I pointed a study in that list, it actually increases interleukin-6 and a number of other inflammatory biomarkers. So it's actually a bad thing, So when you skew but when you go on a meat-heavy diet, you actually, the bifidobacteria actually go up, and they actually have the opposite effect of basically down-regulating some of these inflammatory pathways. So, there's the difference between one diet and another, or as people would characterize it as an extreme diet, one against or another, which I don't think it in those terms, obviously, but that's how people usually, but you can say, well, you can point to that, to the differences between a highly, nearly 90+% plant-based diet compared to 90+% animal-based diet, and the different sort of strains that are actually, but at the same time, there are a whole lot of others that actually change as well, the composition, which means that you actually get all these other types of short-chain fatty acids that actually emerge, which are higher than on plants. So when you're on a carnivore diet, from the proteins themselves, you will get these short-chain fatty acids, which are much better. But also one actually lowers, that's acetate. And people don't really know a lot about that. That actually can be converted by the liver back into glucose. So it's actually a good thing that on a carnivore diet that it does go down. So I'm less concerned about that. And everybody makes a fuss about it because it's one of the key ketone bodies. And I go, I don't really care about that one. So that's just a side issue anyway. But if you want to look at that, that's the Dr. Paul Mason's sort of thing on the fiber myth, and that link's there as well. So you can go and look at it, grab that, posted on your Facebook page or anywhere else, as I said, use it, plagiarize it off me. You don't even have to type any of the words, use the same words. I don't have a problem if you plagiarize it, unlike Frank. Not an issue. We're trying to basically promote more sensible thinking out there, which can help the community. So that's the main thing. So yes, you have to be your own advocate. Truly. Yep. When it comes to your doctors and all that, yeah. I've always been an advocate, Yes. The last incident with that little dumb prick of a cardiologist that was trying to peddle, probably just come out of university, had probably been a resident for only probably 1 or 2 years. He was quite young, and he was trying to peddle. They've all, this is the problem. These pharmaceutical companies and reps go to the universities and push their medicines and all that, and they do these special conferences, and they basically put all these flyers out for the medical students. They are literally indoctrinating them before they even finish their university degree. That's the problem. That's what we're fighting against. We're fighting powerful vested interests that are going there and promoting their wares. And this guy, you could see, he was basically, fuming at me, and I'm going, look at my results. Why are you giving me a hard time? And still, I was that far from literally, decking the prick, but, I literally had to go outside and literally punch something else, because I still need to be able to access, I didn't, at the same time, I didn't want basically the police to be called. But, I was just fuming, I was being, this young bloke, and I'm 54, no respect whatsoever, being treated, at the time I was 53, but no respect. It was late last year. No respect whatsoever. Sorry, what am I saying? No, it was earlier this year. But anyway, that's beside the issue. No respect whatsoever on their, towards, an older person, I mean, for friggin' sake. I was just treated like absolute trash by this, no respect whatsoever. I mean, God, what sort of training did they get? But that's the sort of thing. That's the brainwashing. Yeah, it's working. The government never told you pasteurize your salads. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but they're still an issue. Yeah, I know. Look, it's crazy. There's plenty of people getting, salmonella and stuff like that from other things other than raw milk. God. The reason, look, the whole reason is the industry are more in preserving stuff. It's the reason why they put seed oils and sugar in processed foods. They want to preserve them. The reason why they have shelves and shelves of this long life crap. It's the reason why they process things in a certain way. Because you get more shelf life. And also, see, if a company puts something on its shelf and it doesn't get all sold, it has to go back to, a lot of the retailers won't hold it. Will say, look, you have to take it back. It cuts into their profit margins. But if it actually has longer shelf life, it doesn't. There's more profit to be made. There are reasons for it. They're not concerned about our health. They're concerned about their own bottom dollar, the bottom line. That's basically where it all comes down to. Yeah, all the outbreaks in the news are vegetables. Yeah, exactly. We've had a number of them in Australia. It's just. But then you try saying anything about milk, and you want to kill people. I was actually, when I first said, be great to have raw milk and all that. G'day, Richard. But I was literally chastised at work by some people that was saying that I was, that I'd be promoting and putting people at their health at risk by, it's just absolute fucking nonsense. And then I actually, said to the person, because he thought I was accessing it illegally. And then I said, no, this is, it's cold pressed and all that. And he said, I'm not going to pay that sort of money, because he wasn't interested. Again, it's the dollar. This is why these companies, they literally screw the actual producer, and basically, and until you get economies of scale in raw milk, that's the biggest problem you're not going to get. Yeah. Oh, look, governments do provide essential services. They do a fairly good job for a number of things. There's Jared. G'day, mate. You look like fuck. You're fucked, aren't you?
Oh, I'm recovering. I'm a lot better today than I was yesterday.
Don't you have a comb?
Oh, yeah. How's that?
That looks much better.
No, I just got out of a hot bath.
Presentable for the channel.
Dry, that's why it's all crazy.
Mate, I lower the levels as it is on this. I can't have two people basically lowering the the sort of the fashion or the attire level or presentation
I
level.
should at least wear a collar shirt if I'm going to look this disheveled.
Exactly. That's the main thing. I mean, I lower it as it is. I need somebody to elevate it slightly for me. I was relying on you to do that.
So I think you were just talking about raw milk is why I joined now. My raw milk.
Oh, you
went off.
Yes. What's happening at your end of the woods in terms of raw milk and all that?
I'm not sure. I think I might have met somebody who has a cow who will just give me some. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's not a bad. Yeah. Don't mention any names. Remember that they are monitoring everything and everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep it to yourself. Sure, you don't know anyone. You hypothetically know someone.
It's tentative. I met somebody who's sympathetic to my situation. Put it that way.
Yes. Yeah. Look, it's sort of misaligned. Yeah. Look, it's crazy at the moment with a lot of things. I mean, my milk got stranded down at the Hobart Airport. I couldn't access it, so basically I wasn't handling it. It was, the lady that actually picks it up that has the small right. shop store in Hobart, and she wasn't able to get it. And the delivery people said, well, they didn't give it to us. And then they realized they'd mucked up down at the airport. So they didn't, somehow got into a different container and it sort of got mixed up. And the person who was picking up the delivery picked up the wrong items. So yeah, it was a bit of a mix up. And I think because they've had other people down there, other people have gone, there's been a bit of a turnover because of the incidents where they were doing shifts and stuff like that, not enough people to keep track of things. And yeah, the sort of inference that I was sort of given in that regard, but all the details I don't really know. They never tell you anyway. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not hopeful for a return to normalcy anytime soon, except for the raw milk source.
Yeah, look, it's a bit like that. Let's see, we can get something a bit more. So Richard says, we can't all go off medication. There seems to be a purist attitude that carnivals fix everything. It doesn't. And that's true. It doesn't. I agree. And I've never recommended people go immediately off any medications. Even my brother-in-law is still on meds, who's got diabetes, and we've put him on a low-carb diet, and we're slowly bringing down his meds. We're bringing down his, you have to do it stage by stage with a medical practitioner and do it properly. If you can't find a sympathetic one, go to a different one. But there are people out there that you can work with, and that's true. And it's just stage by stage and coming down, and it works, over time.
Yeah,
As I said in the...
I think It's true that carnivore diet likely won't fix everything. But I
Nah.
think there are a lot of things that it takes a long time to fix as well. And mental health can definitely be one of those things that it can take a while. And by a while, I mean, like consecutive
Yep.
years of improving your diet for you to notice benefits.
Precisely. And the thing is, there are some underlying issues, like, for instance, Tim Noakes. He damaged his pancreas by carb loading for so many years to such a degree that he needs to take certain medication to keep, things from not really going haywire. So you can get to a certain level of dysregulation where, unfortunately, you may be on some meds for the rest of your life to basically, if you basically burn out entirely your pancreas and you need a certain level and you become insulin dependent, diabetes 1, you've got no option because otherwise you'll just catabolize and fall apart without insulin. So you'll need a much smaller amount to regulate your blood sugars if you're on a carnivore diet. But at the same time, you will still need some because you can't achieve muscle protein synthesis any other way. So that's, because otherwise you're pushing up, you're pushing up glucagon. And if you're pushing up glucagon, you will basically you'll be pushing ketones into the acidotic level because there's no insulin to sort of taper it back. So, there's, if you're in that sort of state, yeah, you've got to take meds. So there are different types of things that people need to do for a number of different conditions that they may have. Some of them, a lot of them are reversible, I believe. I believe even the guy that actually speaks to Pim about sort of insulin hysteresis type thing, or where you are so damaged that your insulin levels, even though you've fixed everything in the diet, still remain slightly elevated. But you can fix that with fasting. It just takes, you need to sort of do these pulsatile effects of fasting, refeeding, in order to slowly correct and improve the insulin sensitivity. But it takes a hell of a lot. It can take a couple of years doing that. But it can correct itself in that regard. As long as you're supporting those sort of organs. And I actually say, well, carnivore diet's pretty good when it comes to insulin sensitivity. Your beta cells, what do they require to function properly? Zinc. In every single one of them, there is a zinc there is zinc in there. So without zinc, insulin cannot work. So that's very important, in that regard. So that's why if you're trying to fix such a problem like being on a very plant-based type low zinc diet, even if it's low carb, it's not going to work. You could basically have multiple decades that you're basically having forced to take medication. But if you basically and the quicker you remedy that, so it's has to do a lot with trying to correct those things. Really important. Yeah, Greek. I don't mind Greek yogurt. I have it now and then. The Messiah must have to pee often. Why is that? Oh no, what? I actually said that some of them consume between 3.5 to 5.5 litres of milk. On average, it's about probably 4 litres of milk plus per day. Yep, there is quite a lot of fluids in that. That's true in that regard. I've never asked them whether they pee a lot or not. In the end of the day, at the same time, the level, if you're in an arid sort of environment and moving around. So you're losing a lot of fluids just from sweating in that sort of environment. It's probably going to be less of an issue in that regard. Also, the amount of food you're putting in is higher in fat, which means you're hydrating as well. It's just give me a sec. My damn phone's gone off. I forgot to put it on airplane mode.
I'm not going to stand for this, having my appearance criticized when he doesn't even block off the time from his life for this stream. Can we hear what he's saying? Oh, that was a massively short call.
That was Dad. Oops. Yes, he forgot that I was on the end.
He's back. We can stop talking about him now.
Hope it was nice and colourful. You know, if you're going to insult, make it colourful, you know. Look, yeah, look. I mean, when it comes to, yeah, look, my sister resolved her asthma completely, and she was my younger sister, that is, and a smoker. One of these days, I will get her on. She'll be able to tell her own story. It took about 10 months.
I'd love to hear that story.
Exactly, but the thing is, it's really important what you're actually putting into your diet at the same time, and what type. You've got an issue with your lung surfactant. That's one issue. Not all asthma is the same. So I suspect hers was a lung surfactant issue. So lung surfactant is made up of two main parts, choline, and I've got an underlying genetic thing, and I used to have like touch asthma and bronchitis when I was young, but I've always consumed like organ meats and eggs. I've loved eggs and stuff like that, so I never had the issue. My sister didn't eat eggs, avoided cholesterol. She was a vegetarian for 25 years. So she had that issue. But once she switched over, so you may have a high requirement. I don't know what your genetics are, you know, and that's why if you do a 23andMe and then look at those genetic pathways that affect choline metabolism, you may find that you need more choline. And by adding more choline, and after a couple of months, it may resolve your asthma completely. So, don't know. You know, that was her issue in terms of rebuilding her lung surfactant, because the two constituent parts is palmitate, which is a saturated fat, and choline, the two critical parts of lung surfactant. Then also, your lung inside itself has a sort of a collagen sort of matrix as well. You know, well, all our tissue has collagen around it, and it needs to be regulated. The key vitamin that regulates collagen degrading enzymes in the lungs is vitamin D3. So if you're not getting enough from the food or the sun, that can be an issue also. If you're in a warm, hot climate and accessing a lot of vitamin D, less problems. And if you take a look, the further away you are from the equator, the higher the levels of asthma. You know, what is basically very important for your lungs? Vitamin D3. You know, and it's also important, especially in this corona period as well. So, you know, keep that in mind. And I think that if you focus on, you know, on that sort of, you know, in terms of, you've put also there my heart SVT. I don't know what SVT stands for. Do you know, Jared?
No.
I've never heard of it. Yeah, it's SVT. condition. Supraventricular tachycardia. Okay, because it's a Greek word. So a higher heart rate in that regard. I don't know much about this this issue. I've heard about it. And I think that's the study. Trying to find the study, because there is a study on actually on this itself, but I don't, as I said, I've come across it, but I haven't really researched it. So I think, look, I'll try and find it. It wasn't about salt intake, but I can't remember the actual what the parameters for that were exactly. So I'm not gonna basically say anything unless I bloody know what I'm saying in that regard. But sodium has an issue to play with that as well. Very, very important. So, I don't know what your salt intake is like, so it's very hard, or what your general diet is like either. Because it's really hard if people are not, if they're doing a carnivore diet, a keto diet and all that, there could be issues there if they're losing a lot of electrolytes, like a lot of salt, that can exacerbate the issue that they're having as well. So, don't fear salt, guys. I mean, people in the past used to consume 10 times the salt that we consume now. They used to pack salt on meat and fish and all that to preserve them that way, because and put them on pieces of ice, because there was basically no refrigeration back then. So, yeah, that's my general thinking. But I have to find the damn study. I'll try and find it. But I think it was related, it had to do with salt regulation and stuff like that. But, off the top of my head, nope. Let's try and find. So Luke isn't firing on all 4 cylinders, or 6 or 8. I don't know how many cylinders he has. But Luke, you're still doing an omnivorous diet. You're still eating carbs and stuff like that. You're trying to transition to a carnivore diet. I hope you do. You will see better results and better, initially, as you're transitioning, your energy will possibly even tank even more, unfortunately, until you become more fat adapted. And it's just one of those things, transitional issues. I usually always recommend, when people are transitioning either to a carnivore keto diet from a standard diet or vegan diet or whatever, to really up their fat. I can't emphasize it more. Just up your fat, because you really need that extra energy, and really need to force the body to realize sugar aren't coming in anymore. This is the stuff that's coming in from now on. You better switch to it. And so you will increase, and you have to also increase slightly your protein. A lot of people on keto diets get into trouble for the same reason, that they don't increase or especially carnivores as well, particular, that don't increase their protein levels, because they don't, remember, you need to transcript RNA messenger transcription. You need to transcript a whole lot of new enzymes to be able to do that, all the work. Another option is get a lipase, get the sort of enzymes that can, break down fat for a while. That's another option. I've said to people, get a lipase supplement, take it for a while in the early days, for a couple of months until your own body starts producing more and starts, dealing with these things. So, yep, that's pretty good. So it's probably not, it's definitely then not, we can discount because there's quite a bit of choline in liver. So we could, unless you've got both the SNPs and you've really got some severe, genetics there like I have, and I just have to consume quite a lot of choline, and I notice that when I basically cut back, and I've actually done an experiment on myself last year I did, where I cut back really severely on my choline, and I started getting a bit of wheezing. So I knew that was affecting me, so brought it back, all went away. So in that regard, but I was only getting the wheezing when I was walking up the hill. There's this really steep hill and all that, but normally I wouldn't, so immediately, because I walk up 9 flights of stairs at work, so it's, I don't have an issue in that regard, but and I've done it a couple of times when I was actually, because I'm one of the fire wardens, the chief ones, so I sort of have gone up and down the stairs with some of the fire crews when we've had a sort of an issue, cropping up, and I can tell you, God Almighty, your legs feel sore, but my chest didn't, which was good. So it does make a difference, the diet, in that regard. But I think it may be for a lot of people, because Richard's in New Zealand, and like Hobart and like Tasmania, we get bugger all sun. Even in the sunny periods, we don't get a lot of sun. And so that can be an issue in vitamin D. And I find myself, I used to use cod liver oil. Now I use other liposomal type. I try to get enough in my food and all that through most of the year. And at the same time, I fly over to the tropics, spend a month or more in the tropics to get in. This is in the winter, to get as much, and I'm out like every damn day. And I just make sure that whether it's me or my partner basically shopping, I make sure that I get, or she gets, enough liver for me. And I consume the liver for, the sort of to get the MK4, the retinol, to be protective, so I can stay in the sun for 5 hours or, walk around without any issue, and basically be my natural sunscreen. And that is, I'm literally taking in as much vitamin D as I can before I return to Australia, back to Tassie, which is fucking the end of the world, as somebody would say, and, that's the sort of stuff you have to do to basically put your levels up. Yeah, I'd suspect it'd be very similar in Canada, mate.
It gets very dark, and the dark gets to me more than the cold does the older I get, and I suspect that's a lot to do with the lack of vitamin D.
Exactly. Okay. Yep. Yeah. That. I actually prefer lamb's liver than basically beef liver. It's a personal preference of mine. Yeah. Yeah, that can be a problem. Oxalate juice. Yes, I still have a bit of oxalate juice. I got a genetic advantage from my Greek ancestry. I can metabolize caffeine 4 times faster. My genes allow me to. So it's less of an issue. I can have, I usually have about 2 coffees. 2 coffees is equivalent to half a coffee for somebody else. So it's neither here or there in that regard. Obviously, if it's instant, it's going to have more oxalate. And so a good idea would be to put more dairy in it, so to deal with that oxalate. If it's basically, if it's not instant, It's just basically from a proper barista type coffee. There's less oxalate in that because you've eliminated most of the pulp. So those sort of coffees are probably better in terms of oxalates. The difference is instant has more nutrients, and the barista type actually they burn through most of the nutrients, so it's less nutritional in that regard. It loses more of the compounds that are supposedly beneficial, both from a hermetic or just general compounds that are nutrients.
I was drinking light roast for a long time, and like I always source my coffee very well. I get single source organic fair trade stuff whenever I can, which is, I mean, I seek it out. So I don't remember the last time I had a bad coffee, so to speak. But I was drinking a light roast for a long time in a percolator, and found that my throat was getting kind of scratchy from it. And so I switched to dark roast espresso in a mocha pot stovetop espresso maker, and I found that the shorter duration that the beans are in the water for seemed to make a difference.
Yep.
So even though I would expect a dark roast to potentially be more problematic, I think the time in contact with the water is a bigger factor.
I think you're on the money there.
Yeah, so the method through which it's prepared matters as well.
It does very much. I mean, I use espresso as well, coffee, and I, obviously it's hard at work. Sometimes you've got to have instant, because that's the only thing available. Where at home at least you can make it the way you want it, and it's less of an issue. So it is a hassle. I don't know because they're refurbishing our building. I don't know what the new setup's going to be like. Whether they're going to put a coffee machine or not in there. So I'm looking forward to it. If they do, that'll be great. So, but time will tell on that. Alpaca milk. You ever tried that sort of stuff, mate?
Nope.
No, neither have I. I'd have no idea what it probably tastes like milk.
Is it commercially available? I don't know.
Don't know. It could be in the parts of America, obviously in South America, but the other parts I don't know. Hard to say. But I know there are some alpaca breeders in Australia, and I know there are some in North America as well, but I don't know whether they sell milk, so I think you'd have to go to Latin America to find real actual milk.
Could be an untapped market.
Could be. I don't know what the fat protein profile is. No idea. Or whether they even make alpaca cheese. They probably do, wouldn't they?
Why not?
I thought, don't know. I thought the actual alpaca was more for their what is it? Their sort of their fibers. I thought that was the main reason. They were like a
competitor. You mean?
Yeah, the coat, a competitor fiber for people that were into fine fibers. Like they have sheep with really fine, low micron type sheep fibers. I don't know. Alpaca, anybody know whether alpaca fibers are actually very low micron? They may be. I think I heard somewhere something like that, but I'm not sure. Zach's, I can tell you, skinny guys at the gym sculling down all their oxidized powdered drinks. Yep, exactly. Just drink milk, eat eggs and meat. Precisely. And you'll get anabolic, better than the powders. Yeah, look, Zach, you're on the money. The old bodybuilders, and I think I showed you guys what it was last week, where I showed you sort of on the screen. You can go and take a look at that last week's. I can't remember which spot. And it basically, the traditional bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these guys, the big names of the past. It was basically their own which was a thick type shake. You literally had to eat it with a spoon, and it was none of this shit and exactly all these powders. It's not only the fats that a lot of these powders have got that are oxidized, which are really rancid and damaging to the body, but a lot of these proteins are over processed, so they tend to be misfolded proteins. So the body, they don't work as well in the body, and long term, nobody really knows what the long term ramifications are there. Trying to incorporate this sort of stuff. Obviously, this protein turnover, so some of this stuff will come out and be broken down to basic amino acids and all that. And so it probably may not be as deleterious, but we don't know. I'm not saying either way in that regard, but I have to throw the other side in that, at the end of the day, proteins will be broken down to their basic constituent parts. So it's less of a problem. That where the big problem lies in any food is the content of deuterium. When you basically process protein, you up the deuterium levels, and you up the deuterium levels closer to that of sugar. That's a fundamental difference. Not at the level of sugar, but closer to the level of sugar, where protein is much higher than fat in terms of deuterium content, but because you're going 1-to-1 in terms of fat and all that, and you average out the two, it actually falls below the 130 into the 120 sort of mark in the sweet spot, because fat is usually below the 120 sweet spot, the majority of fats. So in that sort of regard, it can be a problem. How much, depends, but Zach, you're on the money, mate. Milk, eggs, and meat was the old bodybuilders' sort of secret. And that's what they did. All the old bodybuilders, you ask them, you look at the old stuff, that is exactly what they did. And that's what I let people know. Tasmania, mate, Tasmania.
It's on the stream title.
Exactly. It is Hobart. You can click on there and you can actually see exactly where I live, which part of the state. Very pretty part of the state. Yeah, they are, man. Yep, they definitely are. At least we've got a lot of egg lovers amongst us, which is good. Oops.
I eat my fair share of eggs.
Sorry, guys, I just overshot again.
I probably go through at least 8 eggs a day. Usually,
Okay.
usually at least you make them like 4 eggs and 2 yolks at a time, and I'll eat that twice. Quite often.
Yeah, I sort of, it varies for me. I usually have anywhere between 4 and 8 eggs a day. Why am I not being able to find my spot? Some reason my StreamYard is playing up. I'll have to just jump somewhere else, because I don't know why it's doing this.
I can't see any earlier than 50 minutes ago.
Okay.
In the live comments chat.
Yeah, mine isn't. It's actually hindering to go back to that spot for whatever reason. So I can't actually go on back to that spot, which is driving me up the wall. I don't know why it's doing this. Okay, let's try this again. No, it's not going to go back. Yeah, sorry, guys. I can't do anything about it. So that's a comment. Oxidative stress, omega-6 ratios, or even the Randall cycle. Look, I have less issues about omega 6 to omega 3s when it comes from animals, their
I can see the
ratios.
first half of that question. Harry, do you have the first half of it?
No, I can't go back beyond that for whatever damn reason. I don't know why
So
it's
he
doing
just
it
asks,
today.
when I go off the carnivore diet about 15 days a year, I get really bad asthma. I used to be asthmatic, but the question is, do you think it must be more related to ... and then what you have on
Okay,
screen?
okay, gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, look, it probably is because a lot of those sort of things, if they're plant-based omega 6s, yep, definitely a problem. A lot of people can't convert them, so they basically stay in their non useful form, and they get incorporated and they have a certain level of damage if they're coming from plant sources, less stable. See the vitamin C and vitamin E in plants isn't as stable. In particular, vitamin C, very unstable. It breaks down quite a bit. You cut something off a plant, put that fruit down, come back in half an hour, and anywhere between a third to half of the actual vitamin C is lost. You refrigerate it and whatever, you may be left with a tenth. And let alone all these plants are very, highly, they've increased the sugar content and all that. They're man-made. They're not something that you would find in nature in that way. So yeah, the Randall cycle, basically, if you basically increase your beyond your caloric requirements, you will hit the Randall cycle, and it's a gradient from there. How severe it is, and how and how resistant the cell becomes to allowing nutrients in. So if it's at the very low level and you've still got some physical activity, happening, it will switch on off, taking in some nutrients out of the bloodstream. But if it's a much higher, it will become more resistant. And if it's chronic over days and months and years and whatever, then it becomes very resistant. And that's when you start just putting on weight like there's no tomorrow. Let alone if you then get beyond a certain threshold, you'll end up with a lot of, leakage out of the adipose tissue and all sorts of inflammation and cytokines and things going really bad under those sort of conditions. But oxidative stress can be reduced if you're on a carnivore diet, for instance. I'm going to do a thing on uric acid, and I'll actually show how lipid peroxidation actually reduces substantially when you've got uric acid out there. It actually suppresses lipid peroxidation from PUFA. Something that not even vitamin E or vitamin C can do very well. Vitamin E can do slightly better, but the problem is vitamin E and vitamin C are bound. The vitamin E is bound to these lipids to stabilize them. Vitamin C is also bound to, in a certain way, to provide a certain amount to basically, for that deleterious side of sugar. Excess amounts of these things, not a good idea, because once they've given away their electrons, they're very poor antioxidants. Once they give away their electrons, they become pro-oxidants. They need to be recycled. And if there's not enough glutathione there, there's not enough of these other elements in the that can actually, like alipoic acid, which is like a master recycler, or other things like that, then they can become problematic. So really important about that. And I wouldn't really be concerned about animal omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. Less of an issue. Plants, definitely, because of the conversion issue. But, if you're getting arachidonic acid, not an issue. Actually, even with this corona thing, it's actually been shown that people with low arachidonic acid status actually had more health issues, because arachidonic acid is involved in the immune response, plus it's involved in cellular repair. So not all inflammation or not all omega-6s, are involved in trying to harm your body. They're there for a purpose in dealing with, stresses and other issues that are attacking the body. So, it's more these basically rancid shit that comes from processed crap that, really has no place in the diet or in our bodies, so to speak. Let's get to another question. It's another conversation the guys are having. Okay, let's find. I get heart palpitations if I come off it, and breathing is difficult.
I think if he comes off the carnivore diet, he means.
Is that what he means? Okay. It's just a comment. Trying to find a question. So this is nearly a question. No. I mean, generally nothing related to corona or through. I think going off the diet could potentially help lowering the immune system. Not sure about what he's talking about there. Let's try and find one. I wish my mum understood English and she could listen about talk about raw milk. Yeah, look, you'll have to translate, mate. It's another way of doing it. Says, are synthetic sports shirts allowed on the Serpanos dress code? Basically only wear. Look, I avoid synthetics because it doesn't allow the body to breathe well. I stick to, even this, all my T-shirts and all the stuff is all cotton-based. It may be woolen-based, so like I've got a jacket that's got an inside lining, which is basically wool-based, and it's really nice. It keeps you nice and warm in winter, I can tell you. So that's I stick to to natural fibers because it allows the body to breathe better, and I think it's much better to support those sort of industries rather than the petrochemical industries. And most of the clothing that comes from natural fibers lasts longer as well.
Yep. I personally try to get cotton clothing as well for the same reasons.
Yep. Okay, let's move down. More comments. I'm trying to find some questions. A lot of people are making a lot of comments. It's all about people's past history. So Richard's mum used to say that I was a kid without enough zinc. She's probably right. Little boys don't become men without zinc. That's true. Very important. Very important for the immune system in the corona era as well. Suppresses viral replication. But we won't go into that. We've already discussed a lot of that. Meditation is so important for mental health, especially if you have any anxiety or depression. Not many talk about this. You must actually put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's worth it. Look, I agree. I do actually breathing exercises, which is sort of the yoga type breathing exercises. I also sort of do certain relaxation things and stuff like that. I try to get out in the sun and just sit and just enjoy the sun and relax, clear my mind, do those sort of things. In summer, I usually lie down and sort of and earth myself to the ground and sort of relax my mind. So yes, it is important. I mean, we're not only food, we're also, our mental state can affect us. The mind can affect the body negatively, like the body and nutrition can also affect the mind negatively. So yes, it's really important, that mind-body connection, to be. Yep. I'll let you say something if you want to.
Oh, just I've had success with meditation in the past for exactly those reasons, for sure. That's something that recently been doing a little bit more of for the first time in a while. I haven't really meditated regularly in about a year, and I really noticed the difference. But the benefits are so diffuse while they're accumulating, you don't really notice how much progress you're making until you stop.
Precisely. Yeah, and people notice it only when they stop it. They notice that they, because there's a lot of things in our environment. I mean, sometimes when I basically have, let's say, an altercation at work with someone, and I've been pissed off for whatever reason, I'll leave my desk. I'll go into the stairwell. I'll go to the toilets, the cubicle, and then I will, it's probably not the best place to go. And sometimes I'll go upstairs because I do have access. And I'll basically just sort of try and relax, do my deep breathing exercise, stuff like that, just to basically just lower the, my stress at that point, just and relax myself, and then go back, and if it's close to lunch, I'll just go earlier. I'll go earlier for lunch, and I'll go out in nature and try to just relax before I come back. And it's, I find it that when I do that, there's a park next, not too far away from my work. It's about a 3-minute walk from my work. And it's one of the big parks, St. David's Park, if anybody knows Hobart. It's one of the big parks in Hobart. It's just beautiful, just sitting and relaxing in that sort of environment, then going back to work. You still feel so refreshed. You go back and you're actually even more productive. It's great. I feel fantastic when I do that. I'll put up your comment, mate. After all,
what kind of breathing exercises do you do, Harry?
Just the sort of deep, with the diaphragm, pushing up the diaphragm, sort of those deep sort of, holding it and then releasing it and expelling it. Those sort of exercises in that regard. Sometimes I do those, those really shallow ones as well in that regard. So it depends, what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I've done, the ones that they sort of talk about, the sort of like a hypoxia type, holding your sort of breath and stuff like that. And so I've tried a number of things, and there are benefits in all that sort of stuff, I believe. I had some serious issues, physical, mental, over the last year or two. Long story, but meditation, yep. Enormous help, yep. Yes, I do.
Ne
mellow nika. Ne, έκανα και γυμνάσιο στην Ελλάδα, όποιος είναι Έλληνας καταλαβαίνει τι λέω. Από τα Αγρίνιο προέρχομαι, που είναι στο, στεριά Ελλάδα, Anyway, basically I just said that, did my high school in Greece. If anybody understands Greek, they'll know what I'm talking about. I come from central Greece, from Agrionion, which is on the west coast. So that's, yeah, anyway. Yes, I'm very much bilingual. And I can actually even read science and philosophy in Greek as well. So I'm well educated in the language. But my accent is a bit old-fashioned, as my sister keeps on fucking reminding me. Little fucking bitch gives me a hard time. Hers is about more, more recent, more modern, And then when it comes to my father, he says, oh, God, he speaks Greek like in the 1960s. Well, that's when he fucking left the country. They still got that accent. I mean, even my father, even though he was born in Greece, he's lived most of his life in Australia. So, because he came out in his late 20s, and we went back for about 6 odd years. But that's when I did my high school there. But yeah, but basically, most of my life I've spent in Tasmania. This is really home in a sense for me. And I suspect even for Dad. Good, we've got quite a few people that love eggs on this channel, which is good. Kate, I know Kate loves eggs. Dr. Gregor wants you to eat the rainbow with his daily dozen. Yes, full of oxalates and every other sort of anti-nutrient you can think of.
I'll eat my daily dozen eggs.
Exactly. Yeah, and Kitty's right. Yes, they're colourful insults to your intestines, which is precisely it. Yes. You only have to see him. I mean, but a lot of these, the problem is a lot of them, I've actually gone away and actually looked at some of where the doctors, like the vegan doctors, are talking to the vegan doctors in some of these lesser known vegan sites. And when you actually look at it, they're talking about it themselves and they're arguing about supplements and, whether to use this, B12 supplement or use that, essential fatty acid type supplement. And they're talking, that's all their focus is on, all these supplements, and you go, when they're on their regular channels, all they're talking about is so-called food and nutrition and all that. And when they're talking amongst themselves in these sort of things, you go, these sort of really closed echo chamber type environments, they're just heavily about all the supplements and what's the best supplement and what to use. And, I use a spray type or this type or, and you realize quite clearly that these people are sort of misrepresenting a lot of things to the people that follow them. And this is why they probably can do it longer because, as I've said in the past, these people do injectables. I mean, if you're doing injectables and getting stuff in and there and all that, which you can't get in the diet because but you're actually getting, you can go for longer. And let alone if these people are prepared to do all these sort of injectables, what else are they doing that they're not telling us or cheating in the background?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know from a lot of ex-vegans, they cheated quite a bit. They admit it now, but back then they weren't. So I would say, yes, it's in that regard. So science embarrassed. USA, per FDA regs, it's illegal to say something natural is curative. Only pharma can prevent, treat, or cure a disease. Total BS, exactly. Scurvy, rickets, beriberi, for example. Yeah, exactly. If you're not, you basically C, you D, and you basically things like thiamine and whatever else. Yeah. Oh, look, these are the fucking problems with these sort of people. The reality is, if you go back to the 1930s, 1940s, and whatever, these things were considered cures. They would say, take this vitamin, it cures this. Take that vitamin, it cures that. Take this mineral, it cures that. Look at the old literature. This is the problem we've got. I don't know, it's just crazy stuff that we've got nowadays in the literature where natural stuff is down as, no, it's, but when you've got a medical establishment where the pharmacy, the drug rep turns up to the doctor's practice and tells him, this is the latest drug, this is the new super drug, this will do magic and all that, and they have zero education in nutrition because that was hijacked back in the 70s and no longer practiced by the doctors because the doctors were told to stay out of that. That's a nutritionist. who are basically run by the Seventh-day Adventists and other groups like that, obviously you've got a situation where we end up in a world where basic good nutrition, we can't even talk about it, or a doctor can't, or recommend it. Exactly. Yes, exactly. That's how I feel, Kate, positively, sick to my, stomach, but this is what that people are recommending: eat veg and fruit. I mean, even the sayings in the past, we used to have a saying in Australia where we would say meat and 3 veg. It was an old saying. And then it got hijacked as fruit and veg. And now that's what they use, fruit and veg. So basically they took out the meat entirely, and they just hijacked that whole message. And this is the problem. If you take a look at what the vegans and vegetarians, because the vegetarian movement did that with the fruit and veg, and now the vegan movement are trying to do something similar. They're using similar tactics to basically promote that their foods are healthy and everything else isn't. The same tactics are being used, and they're reusing our messages and altering them. Yeah, it drives me up the wall. SVT can be nasty when your heart rate is doing 180. Shit, for 20 minutes. God almighty. That is high. That is really high. I don't know what your sodium intake is. I suspect if you increase your sodium, you may be one of those people who needs more sodium. There are people that basically have a higher sodium requirement than others. And they usually find, I've in the past, as I said, about this specific, because there could be other factors that are at play with this specific conditions. That's why I'm not recommending, upping your salt. But you may want to increase by small increments and see whether you get any response. And that's personal. I'm not recommending anything. That's if you want to experiment and try that and see whether you get any improvement, because I don't know specifically for that ailment. I know for other types of high heart rates that salt can effectively deal with it. But about this one, and that's why I just can't, Richard. You understand. There are rules that we all have to play by, even myself, even though I don't like to play by them. And a Scotch steak, a slice of goat butter, and 2 chicken bones. Gut feels happy. That's why we love you, Kate.
Harry Luke just posted his visualization of the tunnel that I said I was digging last week.
Oh, we've got a new one. Hold on. Everything stops.
He's got me commanding goons.
How far down is it? Oh,
I've got
found it.
I've got peons beneath me, in my organized crime ring.
We definitely need to put this up.
Beautiful. Keeping consistent with the pinstripes, I see.
Mate, you look really flashy there.
Doesn't look like I'm treating my goon very well.
No, God.
Bloody hell. Have too much sympathy for them, or else they won't get the job done fast enough.
That's exactly right. You got to be harsh. You got to get your milk, mate. You got to be harsh. There's no other way about it. You can't be soft on these people. They need to pick up their game. You're going to get your milk, your white stuff.
My white sky.
Yeah, perfect, mate.
I took one of my frozen gallons out of the freezer today because I might be getting more. We'll see.
Desperation has hit.
Yeah, I had people teasing me on Bart's Discord that I wasn't sick yesterday. I was just going through milk withdrawal. I was like bedridden with the worst stomach bug of my life yesterday. And
yeah, oh well, it happens to all of us.
Yeah, I seem to have gotten over it pretty quick at least. So,
I mean, the reality is, look, all food supply has some risk factor to it because people are handling it with their hands.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think this might have been like a norovirus or something.
Okay. You may be susceptible.
It seems to set in over a couple of days.
Yep. I'm susceptible.
Corinne ate all the same things that I ate. My partner there, she didn't get sick.
Okay. Yeah, norovirus is a thing that I'm susceptible. I've got the worst genetics for it. You may as well if you're more susceptible. And so, yeah, I tend to, it just happens, we're just slightly more. That's why I don't go onto cruise ships. Luckily, otherwise I would have been stranded with what recently was happening. Boris asked about liver is some conductivity issues may be due to copper deficiency based. Well, copper plays an important role. That's one thing. Copper definitely plays a role. For iron metabolism, for a number of things. So very important.
I think you skipped Kate Apted's question about the average day of eating.
Oh, did I?
You had it up, but we didn't answer it.
Sorry. What does an average day of eating look like for you? I'll let you go with this. I'll have a bit of milk.
For me, in terms of what I eat almost every day, I usually have bacon and scrambled eggs for breakfast. I eat maybe a quarter pound of bacon, not a whole lot, with like 4 eggs and 2 yolks, salted without any other seasonings. And when I had milk, I would maybe have some milk with breakfast. And usually my dinner will look similar in terms of I'll have eggs with it again, but I'll have cut of red meat with a lot of butter at the same time. And
more?
I sometimes put like Parmesan Reggiano cheese grated on my eggs. And then a couple of times a month I'll have some liver, maybe some fish, not on a very regular basis though. In terms of what I eat all the time, it's mostly bacon and eggs and red meat, I guess. Right now, anyway.
Look, I'm pretty much, I do like bacon, I have to be honest. I've got 2 packs in there of smoked, pastured bacon. So, yeah, I'm very much into that as well. Pastured meats, whether it's, any type of pastured meat. Primarily, that's the sort of foods that I have, which is basically organ meats, different muscle meats from different ruminants, eggs, anywhere between 4 to 8 eggs a day, depends on the day. I'll have seafood. It varies from once up to 3 times a week. Fish, I better clarify that, fish. And when it comes to seafood, probably once a week. There's usually oysters, but then again, sometimes I do get mussels and other things. Depends. If basically I've got, because it is really dependent on whether I can access, like I'll go to the store, And if they've got like the pastured chicken broth, yes, I'll basically get crustaceans, and then I'll basically use that as the water base to basically then boil my my crustaceans in that. But if I don't, I'll give it a miss till I can actually access the chicken broth or not. So I usually combine it. So it depends. It's really dependent on whether I can get one item in order to have it with another item. So that's usually that. My first meal is usually anywhere between 10:30, sometimes at 10, but not always, but usually 10:30 to 11, somewhere in there is my first meal. I usually have a midday sort of snack when I get back from lunch, because I usually try and enjoy lunch having it in nature, because it sort of resets me, for the afternoon of work, So, and then in the early evening, I will basically have usually a big steak most of the time. Sometimes I'll have liver. Sometimes I may have fish. And very rarely do I have I do sometimes have scrambled eggs, but it's usually quite rare. It's usually I will take the eggs, like 4 or 6 eggs, usually to work, put them in the fridge, and after lunch when I've come back, I'll take them out, cut them up quickly and just have them as a snack while I'm doing my work. And that's sort of how I do it. But occasionally, sometimes at night, that's why I end up sometimes even having 10 eggs a day, because I may, have 4 eggs and then I'll throw in 6 eggs and do scrambled eggs with a bit of lamb or beef or something like that. So it sort of varies. And I do have butter, and I'll put butter. I do love putting butter, especially on scrambled eggs. Oh, that's really nice. So...
yeah, I cook my scrambled eggs in butter, and sometimes butter and bacon fat.
Yeah, exactly.
I usually fry some bacon and then pour off half of the fat or so, and fry my eggs in that with a little bit extra butter.
Yeah, but that's it. And sometimes I'll cook the bacon, like put it on a bench top, cut it up in small bits while I'm doing my scrambled eggs, and then throw it in, and so towards the end, and sort of mix it up in that regard, and then put on a plate. Put a bit of butter on top with salt and pepper. If I want additional, because sometimes you put initially some salt, pepper, and then you look at it and you go, I can hardly see any. You go, add a bit more. I know it's the visual look, possibly psychological. I put it down as psychological need.
I do still eat black pepper sometimes.
I still do occasionally, not always. I do a New Yorker, which is, the Frank Tufano type of approach of steak, where you pack on both sides salt and pepper, and then you press it in. You pack it in that way. I saw him doing it once, and how he does it, and then just turning it over. You get all the sides, and you just turn it over until you get that nice crust. And once you get that crust, and you're basically rare inside, you take it off, and that's really nice. It's sort of between the rare and that crusty type thing. It really has a nice sort of taste to it and texture to it. So, a few things like that. That's pretty much about it. And the milk, 1 glass of milk a day, and that usually is in the evening for me. So
I'm drinking from a milk jar since I can't have milk.
You've definitely got an addiction, haven't you?
Yeah,
it's probably psychological, psychosomatic, but there's definitely something there.
Doesn't it have to be bad for me for it to be addictive?
It sort of explains.
Oh. Just froze on my end. I don't know if anybody can still hear me. Harry's frozen. I've just got a spinning circle. I'm assuming it might have lagged him out again from screen share. I think that happened last week. Dang. I was just going to give my 5-minute warning too. Now I have to wait for him to get back. So you guys just see me in a little corner over here with this giant black screen. And Kate Apted's profile picture, like, enormous down here relative to me. Talk about milk. What do you want to know about milk? Raw milk is delicious. Pasteurized milk I can't drink. I was raised on raw milk, and then suddenly, like in my teens, I noticed I didn't really like milk as much anymore, and then I realized later it was because
I just knocked myself out.
it was pasteurized. Hey, Harry, we were getting along just fine.
Now it's got 3 sessions of me. Oh, they just took them out. 3 sessions of me in the actual chat thing. 3 separate connections. So, oh God. Yes, I tried to basically what I was saying. That's why Jared gets into this sort of activity. This time it worked, and for some reason it just froze. StreamYard StreamYard. I don't know. It's been really problematic for a lot of us, unfortunately.
I think I'm going to go in a few minutes here, Harry.
Yep. And it's literally taken all the previous stuff out, so we're further down. According to the pyramid. Yep. Comment. See whether we can get a few questions. You're welcome, mate. Yeah, we're not getting a lot of questions today. People seem to be having their own conversations. Yeah, those young ladies are the ones with Paul Saladino. I actually do sub to them. Yes, they're quite colourful young ladies, and you know, good contributors to the carnivore community. Yep, I agree. They are. They're pretty good. They've got the head screwed on the right way. Best way to find out anything as an individual is to try things and test it out. Yep, I'd agree, Daniel.
Not everything, though.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, we're talking about nutrition here.
I've heard it's possible to break your leg, but I haven't done it personally. But I believe it's possible.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. There's just food items, excluding everything else, just to be on the safe side.
In terms of dietary intervention, it's absolutely valuable to establish baselines for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much perfect reply on that one. Luke. Harry, I believe Brazilians take too long to get sick despite the amount of carbs consumed. Can this be because of tropical DNA? Once older, everything got destroyed. No, actually it's deuterium. That's all it is, deuterium. If you're in the tropics, look at it freely. You know, you get basically vegans who are basically outside the tropics, like in Canada. There's I remember the guy in Canada that was basically literally bedridden. There was a vegan. I can't remember his name now. He used to transmit off, and there was all these other people that are very catabolic, falling apart. If you're basically in the tropics, you're basically, even if you're on a catabolic diet like that, you're getting a third of your energy from the sun directly. And she would go out in the sun continuously. So it's less catabolic because you're getting a third of your energy directly from the sun through your melanopsin, receptors. So that's one. The second thing is fruit is very high in deuterium. So if you're out in the sun continuously, you're depleting deuterium. So your deuterium load is going to be lower. Yes, you're in the toilet more often, peeing it out. That's another reason why I say that Cole's wrong about his new snake diet that includes urine, because urine has 150 to 300 parts per million, which is very high. 120 is a sweet zone. Anything above 130 starts becoming more dangerous. So do not drink your urine, especially if you're freely on a high deuterium diet. So obviously, that's the reason why people in the tropics can get away with more carb consumption. That's the key. So it's basically the deuterium level, plus they're more physically active, so they're burning more of that stuff. So there are a number of factors. People are far more physical in doing physical work and keeping at that lower gradient of the Randall cycle rather than a higher gradient, which people in North America, Australia, Europe, that are basically doing more sedentary type jobs, working in offices and places like that. Because you can actually see it, even people that eat a lot of carbs, and I know some people that eat a lot of carbs that basically are in jobs like transport that have those sort of issues. But then when you look at other people that are in postal type position where they're cycling around all the time, all day, and doing a lot of physical activity, they don't have the same issues because they're keeping that gradient much lower, and so it's less of an issue, less resistance, less insulin resistance and stuff like that. So there are reasons behind it that can vary. I suspect that those Brazilians that are living in Brasilia, the capital, and working in those big offices and doing sedentary office work and not getting a lot of sun exposure, I suspect the rates of health issues amongst those people would be much higher than the average Brazilian. Damn, I haven't seen that movie for years. With Cleese, remember the guy that was Life O'Brien,
Yeah. I've seen, I was a fan of Monty Python's work a little bit. I mean, I was into them a little bit more a long time ago, I guess, but I've seen most of their stuff. But A Fish Called Wanda is a movie I've only seen probably once or twice when I was a kid. Even though, I love John Cleese. I should watch that again sometime.
See, Grandpa, they're taking the piss out of you, these people. Oh, God almighty. No respect for the elderly whatsoever.
Can't get no respect at all.
Got 29 chicken eggs started hatching today. Handful. Yes, they would be. I'm trying to assemble equipment at work during this live stream. It's tough. Gonna be working late. So yeah, doing some work. Okay, what's Shelley saying? I'm going to head out, gang. Didn't sleep well last night. Yeah, I sort of went late, unfortunately, as well. That's why I didn't get up early to be able to see Pim's or most of Bart's. So I'll see those after. Be safe. Thank you, Tasmanian Devil Harry. Yes, can be quite devilish. I will enjoy my rest tomorrow. I've actually taken the whole week off, which is good. So even though I'm working from home, technically, I'll be on leave right through until the following Monday, which is great. So a bit of a break, do a few other things. I need to edit that other video that I've got. So I've got a few things that I have to do, plus a few things for Dad as well. Get a few things sorted, to have him a bit better prepared as well. So, let alone I'm out hunting, trying to find my sister's cat. She was staying with my dad and ran away. Went right through his legs. He said, "Oh, I was going out to put some trash in." So somehow, and potentially I've been going up through sort of the neighbourhood area and up to her old residency and trying to see whether the cat's turned up, and left messages around the place with people. It's on Facebook down here and a few other things. So she turns up, been running around. We're going to try a few other things. Need to get a special sort of like a cage thing, but we don't know what sort of cat we may end up with, which is the other problem. Putting the cage out, right, putting some food in, and trying to trap her that way. So, yeah. And the problem is my sister can't.
I certainly hope it comes home.
Yeah. Look, because the thing is, my sister basically, because she was moving to Western Australia, until she got her place over there, she sort of had to wait before getting us to basically send the cat back over to her. But the problem is, in the meantime, the Tasmanian government decided to basically pull up the drawbridge on everything, which basically means you can't send any animals in or out of the state, not only humans, but also animals, which basically means that the cat's here for months. And my sister's really disappointed in that fact. And I said, well, should have taken her earlier. And she said, I don't know a place yet. And I said, well, can't help you now. You knew what was happening. It may have been bite the bullet, get her over there, put her into a sort of a temporary sort of place for a while until you found a new place to rent. So it was, she was sort of, I was surprised she even got out of the state initially, and because she'd actually given up her lease, she probably would have ended up with me for a couple of months. Thank God for that. Just kidding. I put up with her for 10 months before. Joking. She's probably going to see this and she's probably going to say, I heard what you said.
Okay, I think I need to head to bed.
You do that, mate. I'm going to stroll through here and trying to find some good questions. And, take care. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We're not it's all related to the milk. Yes, you could blame that it's basically norovirus or
somebody else suggested that it must be listeria from all the raw milk, and I said, but it's been 2 weeks since I've had one.
He has an entity.
Powerful listeria.
It's a late side effect. Yeah. He must have been vegan. Only a vegan would come up with something idiotic like that. Brain fogged. Must be the milk. He's not drinking any. It must be the milk. But he's not fucking drinking any. Yep, it's brain fog.
No, it's the lack of milk. It's the milk detoxes.
No, I'm talking about the vegan that was criticizing you.
Yeah. All right.
See you, mate. Take care.
Thanks, Harry. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, definitely. Back to me, guys. Customer of mine. Red chickens with all blacks skin due to genetic rarity. Supposedly, so it's a Pakistani variety. Is that it? Okay. Different sort of coloured. To be honest, when it comes to chickens and their sort of the types of chickens. I've seen some in Southeast Asia, they're very lean. It's probably because if they were any fatter, that pass out from the high humidity. Okay. Interesting. I didn't know that. Thanks, Kate. So that variety actually is used in tradition. Yeah. Oh, there you go. I learned something. Thanks. Yeah, look. Yeah. And exactly. Yeah. So, it's unless you know somebody's exact genetics, exact history, exact circumstances. That's why, I mean, I can always give people a general idea or general position on certain things and things that I know that actually work. But when you're trying to troubleshoot certain conditions that people have, you really need a background history, you know. Um, and since I don't do consultancies, it's very hard. I usually say to people, look, send me an email, and if I've got time, I'll get around to it, and it may take a couple of days, and then, most people only have to wait for a couple of days, and then I respond and let them know, and provide them with some information. But yeah, it's very hard on a live stream to do that, and I don't want to do that because basically I don't want to give people half a solution because I don't know enough about their own circumstances, and that can be risky. Oh, look, desperations. He's digging a tunnel. He's digging a tunnel. Exactly. It's not as wide as I thought. Yeah, but then he doesn't have enough, enough people working on it. That's his problem. Profits must be down this in this period. Key. So Daniel, I eat mainly sardines and eggs because they're cheap. Steak or minced beef once a week. Yeah, look, I have sardines now and then. I usually buy them fresh and I usually go to the waterfront down in Hobart, and I'll buy them fresh from there if I'm going to cook them that day. Otherwise, I don't really, because of oxidative byproducts and stuff like that. Also, it depends on I do have some sardine tins as well, and it's because of if we basically isolation levels go to the next level where you can't go out, you're really restricted. I'll probably need to use those, and I've actually got myself astaxanthin so I can actually use it, because the biggest problem is if it's not fresh, usually the astaxanthin, that reddish little bit that's around the fish that's in, has actually degraded, so it's not as useful in that regard. This week we've been quite light on questions. You guys must have hammered everyone else when it comes to questions, and so my goodness, haha. My cousin says it's haha. She keeps building up excuses all through. She does not consume milk, but when she has a dish somewhere else, she says somebody might have put it in that. Oh, it depends on whether she's lactose tolerant or has lactose persistent genes or not. In that regard. Yep, they are a pain. They are definitely pain. And I'm, sort of, that's why I've pushed the time slot back an hour, trying to get more people to stay on for longer, and also for other people, that are in parts of North America and stuff like that. It's always a hassle in that regard. See you, mate, and thanks for all the stuff you do. Okay, she's almost vegan. Very unfortunate regard. Hold on. So Luke's got something new for us. I'll just grab that. Gotta put this on. Oh, hold on. I'll just. Nice one. Thanks, Luke. Very nice. Very humorous. Good one, mate. There's a couple of things that I'll be looking at this coming week and all that. I know Pim had her this morning. She had a thing on that. I haven't seen it yet, but I did download the study, and it was about pretty much an area that I've been looking at as well. I pinned 3 other studies back to her and sent them to her. Obviously, because I sent them last night, she would have got them early in the morning, so she wouldn't have had a chance to look at them. And they're in relation to the same sort of pathways, but they're older studies. So there is an issue there. I'm also looking at another sort of pathway that I've discussed in the past about how sulfur plays an important role within, because sulfur can actually displace some of those hydrogens. So within that sort of where the heme ion is actually sitting. So and also within where the actual ion itself is bound within hemoglobin. And so there could be, and I'm not saying that, I have to look at the exact pathway this virus is using to understand whether sulfur is another element that can actually block the virus from, taking, opportunistically. So I'm not sure yet, because I wasn't even aware, because I've looked at all the other, this is a new pathway. It's a secondary. I mean, I don't think it's as important as possibly people are making out in that regards. I think that if you suppress, like I actually said, with vitamin D, quinine, with suppressor replication with zinc, you're not going to get the big amount of viral load in the system. And if you're not getting the big viral load, you're not going to get a lot of damage to your red blood cells. So if you're not getting a lot of damage to your red blood cells, it's going to be less of an issue in that regard. Now, sulfur may play a role as well in sort of mitigating that, because it does in some other regards, but I haven't looked into it yet. I haven't had time to look into that. So there may be something there for sulfur playing a role. So I have to investigate that pathway, because I just downloaded the study that Pim was looking at, and I've looked at, and I've got some other studies that I sent her, and which are historical ones on these same pathways. So they're related, but I haven't looked, and I've looked, and I've got some others that are related to sulfur as well. And sulfur plays a very, very important role in stabilizing oxygen within. There's high levels of sulfonation within basically, and the level of sulfonation determines how stable hemoglobin within the actual red blood cell is. So this is another factor, because there are other things also that degrade. Basically, it's not only viruses, but other things that can degrade red blood cells and end up with a lot of free iron in the system. And sulfur plays a role in sort of stabilizing that. But I don't know how aggressive this virus works on those red blood cells yet, unless I look into it. So I haven't actually, because basically I still think the ACE2 receptor plays a role. All the coronaviruses and all the studies that look at coronaviruses are focused on that. And I would be surprised that this one was the odd one out. So I think it's a sort of a secondary effect, that once the corona gets into the actual cells, propagates itself, uses the machinery to transcript. Same way, RNA transcription to produce enzymes are done by the cell. Well, it hijacks the system. That's what viruses do. They use their own RNA to basically then use the same machinery to replicate themselves. And zinc can suppress that. So if you've basically got too much of this expression and all the cells, and then you don't have enough vitamin D to sort of moderate the sort of cytokine storm or the cytokine response, yep, it can. And yeah, that's right. Yep. Sulfur amino acids in eggs, in meat. And I'm saying our sort of diet seems to be more protective in that regard. But I still, to be honest, I don't like speculating. I still need to investigate these sort of these rabbit holes a bit better. And when I do, then I can come back with something a bit more solid, because I don't think even this study is very inconclusive on a lot of these things. It doesn't really, they know that it happens, but they don't explain why it happens exactly, all the actual mechanisms, how it's interplaying, what receptors are being utilized. They think that there are certain receptors. They think that people with O type are less prone. But then again, I just really quickly last night went right through the study just quickly, and just scanned it through quickly, and whatever I picked up, that was about it, from, memory. But I haven't really looked at in any detail. So I don't like, because otherwise I'm speculating. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what that pathway actually does, how much, what the effect is of the virus if it propagates on the red blood cells. How much does sulfur mitigate or not? Or whether any other substance mitigates or not. So I'm not, still, I need to find out a bit more. Likewise, mate. Good to see you as well. Yeah, we're pretty much up to the 3-hour mark, and that's usually when I pull the plug. But since nobody asked for about corona at all today, I don't know why. It's, usually I get quite a lot of people, talking about corona and stuff like that. And so, no, freeze drying does nothing. The product has it. I mean, even with water, you have to go through an industrial process to basically reduce the deuterium levels. So it's your body does it very effectively. I mean, the reason why you urinate, you will pee out more when you eat sugar, because sugar basically, when you consume sugar, 0.44 of that becomes metabolic water, and the rest becomes part of the urination process. That's why high sugar induces a lot of urination. It's why diabetics are very urinate constantly. They deplete. They've got a lot of deuterium to deplete. The body does as best job it can, but if you get beyond a certain threshold, then they start the protein gradients within your mitochondria changes slightly, and you'll get a couple of neutrons that actually end up getting into that gradient. And when they get into that gradient, they'll do some damage or completely damage the nanomotor that generates ATP synthase, the energy that we need. So in that regard, when you're looking at it, none of these things do it, and the end of the day, you want to steer clear as much as possible from anything which is, now there is an exception, fat from your body or fat from the stuff you consume is slightly different as well. So the fat you consume can be quite low in deuterium, but the fat you get from your body can even be lower because it's already to some extent depleted. Depends on the fatty acids, actually. But with sugar, obviously, it varies to different degrees. And that's why you basically can get more metabolic water out of fat, 1.1 for 1, which basically means it hydrates you, fat hydrates you, sugar dehydrates you, which is a very important thing to remember. Beyond that, it's really important to remember that endogenous sugar, on the other hand, that is produced from glycerol, backbone, and all that, that's also deuterium depleted. So it's not an issue. So the sugar that you produce endogenously within your body isn't going to be an issue in terms of having too much deuterium as a growth factor. And that's why you don't get this, when you have gluconeogenesis, you don't get any sort of big spike because it's measured and it's also highly depleted compared to regular sugar. Obviously, the sugar molecule within the triglyceride is the part that's got most of the deuterium. So the fatty acids, or the free fatty acids, the three that come off the triglyceride, they are more depleted if we want to sort of break the different parts. But obviously that sugar that comes from fat is basically lower, that's used in gluconeogenesis, is lower than the stuff you get from eating it from outside. So that's another factor as well. Why should you, another reason why you shouldn't eat sugar, and you should get it from your body, from your fat stores, or from fat that you eat. We're Greek gods, immortals. Yep, they were. Well, they thought they were anyway. Okay. Yeah, look, unless I read it, I can't really explain. And I, probably Pim did probably a good job of explaining it, going through and looking at the key parts of it. And I suspect, because just going really quickly through it, it's an issue, and it's really down to the cytokine storm part, So unless you get the cytokine storm, until you get to the stage of cytokine storm where you've got the virus has just basically replicated so much endemically through your body that it's starting to attack a lot of tissue in your body, including red blood cells and all that. I think at that stage, then it becomes a big problem, because if you're knocking off a lot of red blood cells, getting oxygen in, then you're basically also damaging a lot of lung tissue, lung cells. You can't basically do this oxygen carbon dioxide exchange. That means you will create a more acidic type environment within your bloodstream. So acidosis will go up as well. So, it can be a real mess at that stage, trying to keep you alive on a respirator. And even people have said that 83% of people that get on a respirator do not survive. And this is a doctor that actually said this, it's actually, that works in the field, 83%. So it's a very high level of mortality once you get to that stage. So really you want to avoid getting to that stage, and really this is where the ACE2 receptor and inhibiting the ability for that, using quinine, using, to prevent the virus attaching itself to that receptor, then also, preventing replication with zinc in the cell, so it's really, if you can keep it down and you've got enough vitamin D for the T cells to do their job to keep it down and all that. And it's really, I've been saying to people lately, have in your home some tonic water. And remember, if you're drinking a lot of tonic water, you need to ditch the water, because high amounts of water are toxic. Let me just say this again. High amounts of water are toxic, So basically, if we're going to drink tonic water, we need to ditch all other water sources. But that's only when this happens. So you basically store tonic water in your home and keep it there. You store zinc supplements in your home, you keep them there. And the zinc supplements you want are lozenges, without any citric, they can't have any citric acid in it. It prevents them from working properly. This is based on a virologist that actually explained this, exactly how it works. He's actually put out like a working document on how you should do it. And basically you want non-citric acid based lozenge, zinc lozenge, and non-citric based chewable zinc tablet. So either one will do. So the moment you get the first signs of that you've symptoms, you immediately go on you cut off all other water, stop coffee and all that sort of stuff, no other water. You focus on basically getting enough quinine into you, but without getting excessive amounts and causing problems with, diluting your electrolytes. You don't want to do that. And so, and you consume your basically, you start taking these zinc tablets and all that. You want to be taking about, for an adult, probably about 4, for a teenager, 3, for a young pre-teenager, you're looking at about 2, for a really small child, probably 1. It's in terms of that, and you take these lozenges together with some quinine. I'm actually going to put a post after this. I'll actually, I'll see. I'll have to do I'll do a vid. I'll do a proper vid with the actual dosages and stuff like that, just to clarify all that, because I've put stuff out there and posts, but I need to clarify all that, how much liquids, because there's actually a website you can put in your weight. Your weight should determine how much liquids you take in. Like we do, as I said in the past with veterinary science, we use weight to determine the type of supplementation, but also the amount of water you take in. So that's too much water is toxic for the body. So we need to basically sort of measure that. And then your vitamin D status, that's very important, because that provides support for your T cells and also regulates macrophage, so it doesn't overreact in terms of cytokine storm and that sort of effect. So at the end of the day, we're trying to taper down things. Now, I'm still trying to find out about the sulfur side and the red blood cells and stuff like that, and a few other things of that sort, or whether there are other things that can play a role there as well. So I'll come back with something on that. Needs to be further investigated. And really that's sort of your focus, but you need to have those things at home and ready to go in your toolkit. You don't use them. You don't need to use them now. You're on a healthy diet, you're eating enough zinc and all that. It's just basically at that moment where, because we don't want to create copper zinc imbalances, but for a week, it's not going to create any of that sort of problem. So really you want to have that stuff ready to go at that point where you switch over and you say, now I've got symptoms. I've got a fever and all that. I need to switch over to these things. I need to up my vitamin D. If I'm not getting enough sun, I need to up it. Even if I'm getting that, I'd need to go to 4,000 IUs just to be on the safe side, plus add any sun, which is good. And then basically keep the diet clean, no cheats whatsoever in that period. And then basically you add the other parts, and that's going to make the difference, in terms of survival. At the end of the day, they're not a cure, but what they are is they reduce the viral load, and and that makes a big difference because it gives your body more of a chance to fight back. And that's really important because this is something new your body's never seen before. So it needs to basically learn how to kill it, so to speak, learn how to respond to it, learn how to create antibodies for it. So you need to give your body sufficient time to be able to do that. So you're basically trying to keep it suppressed in your system, and then your body will develop the antibody response to be able to deal with it effectively eventually. And so that will give you higher prospects of survivability than anything else. Hope that sort of explains a lot of that sort of stuff and my thinking in that regard. Thinking about doing a couple of long fasts to get rid of the majority of my extra. I wouldn't do it at this stage. This is a time when you need to be very careful. If I was going to do a fast, I would do a 3.5 day fast, and I'd do it completely isolated from any other human just to reset my immune system. At this part, when you've got a cold, bacteria infection or whatever, fasting is really good to starve those things out. But when you've got something like corona, you need good nutrition to fight it. Your body needs to be in really good nick. It doesn't want to be stressed. You don't want to be stressing your body. You want to be in a very good state of affairs and then have the additional nutrients there to throw into the game at a moment's notice. That's the most important thing you need to be focused on, Kitty. It's funny, a lot of places seem to have run out of zinc. Yeah, it's been getting out. But the problem is a lot of people don't realize they're actually getting zinc supplements. Respiratory, they're not going to work. They go into the stomach. You need basically, you could use the tablets and break them up into a powder and basically swallow them, drink them down and all that. And then you will absorb some within that part of the actual tissue. But really, you really need to, you're getting enough zinc from the diet, from the meat, to support your other zinc requirements throughout your body. You need your respiratory system to be supported, and that's where these lozenges, these sort of chewable tablets come in, where you sort of you keep them in your mouth and you sort of work them in your mouth, and the tablets that is, and then they become smaller and smaller, and then you sort of chew the remaining parts, and that's pretty much it. So they will absorb within the respiratory system, the upper respiratory system, which is where you want them, because that's where you want also those peptides to be activated as well. That's where the additional vitamin D comes in as well. And you want to be able to respond that initial part of your mucosal layers and your upper respiratory tract. That's what needs to be all geared up to deal with that initial assault, and basically also protect the lungs as much as possible. The longer you protect the lungs from damage, the more better fighting chance you've got. Yep, that regard. Yep. I just covered that before about the citric acid. Look, You could. I would, if you're on a carnivore diet, you don't need, you don't really need citric acid. You could have it. I've always recommended to people, if you want to basically just boost up, if you want to use it on an empty stomach, that's the best time. And definitely away from any zinc supplement that you're using, especially at a time when you need it. But if you're basically just using it before you get the ailment, not a problem. I don't see a big problem with it. No, don't worry, mate. It's only a couple of minutes. So anyway, we're basically at the end. Look, thanks, guys. Appreciated it. It was very light-hearted this week. Please like and subscribe. Please share as well around, so people basically see this video and basically get some information out as well in that regard to your families and friends. The end of the day, all we can do is do the best we can in this sort of difficult time, and a bit of information here and there that we're all trying to get out. Pim does a great job, so I suspect her coverage would have been top notch. I won't be watching Bart's, because most of the muscle stuff and all that, I'm aware of a lot of that stuff because I've looked at bodybuilder sites and stuff like that. So that doesn't interest me as much, as I'll be checking Pim's right after this. I do recommend that other people that haven't watched it should go away and watch it as well. And yep. Thanks. Appreciate everything and all your support. Take care. We always keep up the humor, me and Jared. I mean, I try to keep it, very sciencey, but also lighthearted, because especially in these trying times. I mean, at the end of the day, we're probably the luckiest people on this planet. We're on a species-appropriate diet. We've got shitloads more information than other people have, and understanding in regards to how to mitigate and how to protect ourselves and keep ourselves much safer and secure, and our families included. And so, yeah, so I think we can afford to be a bit lighthearted, in that regard. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your support. Take care. Have a nice weekend. And see you guys next week. It may be a different day, because it'll probably be Saturday that I'll be doing it. So it'll be, which means in North America, it'll be Friday. It can't be helped, because I've got Easter, Greek Easter next week, and I'll be celebrating that with my father. So take care. We'll be a day back in that regard. So, we'll go back to the normal schedule, just be for next week. Anyway, see you guys. Thanks, and take care, and good night or good day to wherever you are.